To nationalize a business. Remember we talked about communism and capitalism? Well, when you nationalize something, it means the government owns it. It's no longer private industry. So Shell Oil, for example, had business in Cuba. Well, guess what? Shell Oil, everything in Cuba no longer belongs to you. It now belongs to the government. It's Castro. And, you can imagine the reaction. Had Castro been able to work out a deal with refining oil and such, he may not have nationalized, and he may not have gone communist. Back when this whole revolution was going down, the KGB in the Soviet Union, they used to have Castro followed around. They weren't really sure if he was communist or not. They knew Che Guevara was a communist. They knew his brother Raul was a communist. They weren't worried about those two, but they questioned Fidel's loyalty. It was almost by default Fidel had to reach out to the Soviet Union because it just wasn't going to work with America. So, with this revolution, Batista flees the country, and there's many anti-Castro Cubans that are killed, and many flee the country. Those anti-Castro Cubans, many of them are going to be trained by the CIA. And this is going to lead us to topic number 17. The Bay of Pigs invasion. Having a communist country right under our noses, if you look at this map right here, Cuba is only 90 miles from the coast of Florida. This is a huge, huge move for the Soviet Union. And this is a huge shift in the Cold War. How in the world could the U.S. let a country right under their noses go communist? So here's the problem with the Cold War. The United States could roll into Cuba full force, man, do a D-Day type invasion. They could roll Cuba in a day. But they can't do that because it's the Cold War. If they attack a communist country and ally the Soviet Union, that could trigger World War III. We weren't worried about Cuba. We could take Cuba. It's the Soviet Union launching, and we end up in World War III and kill millions of people. Millions of our own people. And so this is a chess match. So what we have to do is, we're supposed to secretly train anti-Castro Cubans and have them invade Cuba and make it look like, it's got to look like Cubans versus Cubans. Even though we're training them, we're giving them guns, and it's like the worst kept secret that this is really a U.S.-backed invasion. Now, I know this map's kind of small, but the U.S. thought they would have a surprise attack and come around to the Bay of Pigs, that Castro wouldn't be expecting that. There's a lot of stories on how Castro found out what he found out. A few of the I'll go over one. One of the stories was one of the anti-Castro Cubans was at a bar, and he's drinking. And what do people that start drinking do a lot of times? They start running their mouth. So he starts running his mouth, and he's like almost bragging about, yeah, man, I'm going to be part of the crew that takes out Castro. And he got back to Castro. There's a few other stories how he found out, but the bottom line is he found out, and he was waiting for him. And the Bay of Pigs was a total disaster. These guys walked in to a meat grinder. Now, President Kennedy was practically told by the military that this was going on. This idea was already in motion before Kennedy became president. He won the 1960 election. They said, hey man, President Eisenhower okayed this. The military didn't have much respect for Kennedy anyway. They pretty much just told them, and Kennedy and his whole cabinet, the whole new frontier, pretty much said, okay. And Kennedy agreed to give them air support if things went bad. But the military guarantees Kennedy is going to be a cakewalk. Now remember this. History is not just about memorizing facts and dates. You can get a lot of life lessons out of history. This is going to be a major screw-up by the United States, and it's a major screw-up by President Kennedy. But he's going to learn from his mistake. That's the thing in life. We all make mistakes. Are you going to learn from your mistakes? You're going to keep making the same ones. There's an argument that if Kennedy does not learn from the mistake he made at the Bay of Pigs, if he doesn't learn from that mistake, he probably makes the same mistake again during the Cuban Missile Crisis and possibly triggers World War III. So the Bay of Pigs is a disaster, even though it wasn't Kennedy's idea, and I'm not trying to be a Kennedy apologist. We could go ahead and make a 3-hour video on all the things Kennedy was lacking in as far as his character and integrity and all that. But for these 13 days during the Cuban Missile Crisis, he may have possibly prevented World War III. The Cuban Missile Crisis. So Kennedy goes on television, he apologizes for the Bay of Pigs, he takes responsibility. His presidential rating actually goes up, surprisingly. But now the United States has invaded Cuba unsuccessfully. Even though it was anti-Castro Cubans, everybody knows that it was led by the CIA and the Americans. Kennedy promised to give air supply in the Bay of Pigs, and then he changed his mind when it came down to it. And the military was fuming at him. To this day, the anti-Castro Cubans that are still alive, they curse Kennedy's name for leaving them out there with no air support. Kennedy's reasoning was, hey man, I'm not starting World War III over freaking Cuba. Castro can have it. We'll figure this out later. So, Kennedy has shown, I believe, this exact same picture you're looking at the bottom. These are from U-2 spy planes. You know, they had the U-2 spy planes were planes that had cameras on it. You didn't have Google Earth back then. You didn't have all these satellites. So they use these U-2 spy planes to take pictures, and they go, Mr. President, that's some bad news here. Cuba has nuclear weapons, and these look like Soviet nuclear weapons. We believe the Soviet Union is secretly shipping nuclear missiles to Cuba. This could change the whole ballgame for the nuclear war. Remember when I talked about mutually assured destruction, MAD? Well, guess what? If the Soviets get Operation Medium Range Missiles in Cuba, that may change the balance of power, and there may be a shift. It might not be mutually assured destruction anymore. The Soviet Union can get an edge. If either country were to get a significant edge, and you don't have mutually assured destruction anymore, that country might be more prone to start a war. So, Kennedy wants to form a blockade and stop the missiles coming in from Cuba, or coming from the Soviet Union to Cuba. The military is going nuts because, they're going ballistic. No pun intended. They're like, are you crazy, Mr. President? We have a blockade to stop them from shipping any more missiles. That's great. What about the missiles that are already there? Because here's the deal. The missiles weren't operational yet. They're laying there in Cuba. It's like having bullets for a .44 Magnum, but you don't have the gun yet. You got to put the gun together. Now, as soon as you put the gun together, you're going to be in business, big time. But the bullets alone aren't doing you much good. So that's where Cuba's at. So the military's argument is, look, we need to attack right now, Mr. President, before those missiles become operational, before they can construct and build the launching pads. Now, the launching pads are just sitting there. Kennedy doesn't want to do that because, again, he's afraid a U.S.-led invasion, an official U.S.-led invasion of Cuba, could lead to World War III. They put the blockade in. We come very close to World War III during the blockade. A Russian ship is headed towards our blockade. It was almost like a game of chicken. And they turn around. According to some authors, we were 90 seconds away from World War III. And the Soviet ship turned around the last minute. To get out of this mess, Khrushchev finally offers a deal. He says, hey, look, nobody wants World War III. If you promise never to invade Cuba, Mr. President, the Soviet Union will take the missiles out. Now, the whole world at this point knows what's going on. People are freaking out. People are buying canned goods. They're building bomb shelters in their backyards, etc. People think this could be, the end of the world. And that deal was great, and the U.S. jumped on it. Only problem is a little later, a second letter from Khrushchev came, and it doesn't even look like he really wrote it, even though his name was signed to it. And it says, oh, by the way, we also need you to remove the missiles from Turkey. Well, Kennedy can't do that. It's like my wife tells me, I'm sitting on the couch watching Family Guy, and my wife says, hey, stupid, take out the garbage. What do? No. I'm watching Family Guy. But what do I do 4 hours later? Yeah, I take out the garbage. But it was my idea to take out the garbage, right? So Kennedy can't take orders from the Soviet Union. It'd be a sign of weakness, a sign of appeasement. Remember that word? Neville Chamberlain, Munich. It would look like a sign of appeasement. There could possibly be a coup in the United States. And that would give the Soviets a huge advantage during the Cuban Missile Crisis. So it really looked like we were going to war. These guys go to bed at night, and they're telling some of them are calling their families, saying, drive to Canada, drive north as much as you can. World War III starts in the morning. Kennedy couldn't agree to that second condition of removing missiles from Turkey. It looked like he was being bullied by the Soviet Union. And they went to bed that night thinking it's a nuclear war in the morning. The midnight hour, there's a few names that get thrown around, but Bobby Kennedy, for the most part, comes up with this idea. Why don't we do this? And he meets with a Soviet representative late at night. It might have been early in the morning. He says, to avoid a nuclear war, why don't we do this? We'll go ahead and take the missiles out of Turkey. And the Soviet representative was shocked. He's like, really, you would do that? He goes, we'll take the missiles out of Turkey in 6 months. Why in 6 months? Because in 6 months, nobody's going to care. It's not going to look like we took the missiles out of Turkey because the Soviet Union told us to. It looks like we took the missiles out of Turkey because we just felt like doing it. Which, ironically, Kennedy wanted to do as soon as he became president. Those missiles were obsolete anyway. We had nuclear subs that the Soviets didn't know about. But in any event, the same reason I don't take out the garbage is second my wife tells me when I'm watching Family Guy. In 4 hours I do it. So it looks like it's my decision. So that's exactly how we avoided World War III. 6 months after the Cuban Missile Crisis, we do take the missiles out of Cuba. Nobody noticed. Nobody cared. And it didn't look like the Soviet Union was dictating American policy. So that's just, that's a quick, poor man's version of the Cuban Missile Crisis. But again, it's a very basic lesson. Great books on the subject that are out there. Actually, one just came out not too long ago. This is the most recent book right here. It's very good, 1 Minute to Midnight. The one, and I don't know, I might have to say this is my favorite book now on the subject. Before this one, what was it? I got it right here. One Hell of a Gamble was a good book. But this one seems to have some information One Hell of a Gamble did not have. Here's a copy of the New York Times. U.S. imposes arms blockade on Cuba on finding offensive missile sites. Kennedy ready for Soviet showdown. I mean, people are just freaking out thinking this could be the end of the world. And it really was the closest we ever came to a nuclear war. This is a very famous political cartoon. Chances are you're going to see this in other high school classes, undergraduate classes, graduate classes. Very famous political cartoon from the Cuban Missile Crisis. Notice Khrushchev, Kennedy sitting on nuclear weapons. Notice the button there. Kennedy could push the button. Khrushchev could push the button. Who's going to blink? Who's going to win? Okay, so now we're going to watch a 13-minute summary explanation on the Cuban Missile Crisis. Now, here's the good thing about the flipped classroom. If you've been in class and we spent 2 days on this, you could fast forward. You could skip this part. If you missed the Cuban Missile Crisis, you really need to watch this. Cuban Missile Crisis, if you can't tell by now, it's going to be all over your exam.